Hello, my name is Richard Goyette, and the title of this video is Reasons to Believe. If you are like most people, you've struggled with the question of God's existence and more specifically, the truth of the Bible. The purpose of this chapter is to help you understand why I believe in the God of the Bible, and in so doing help you believe as well. One of the main reasons many people do not believe in God is that God seems to operate behind the scenes. He hides himself from us and does not seem to answer our prayers. Imagine for a minute, though, what life might be like if God actually did visibly appear to all of us. And we could see him watching over everything we do, even things we do in secret. Now further imagine that what it would be like if God brought down the hammer and immediately whacked us on the side of the head every time we violated one of his rules or even entertained an unwholesome thought. Further imagine what it would be like if God were to instantly reward every good thought and action with a tangible reward. If that were the case, I'm sure you would agree. Our primary motivation for being good would be self-interest. We would be like Pavlov's dogs whose responses were conditioned solely by external stimuli. Selfless, self-sacrificing agape love could not exist in such an environment. Another reason people find it hard to believe in God is related to that. They cannot understand why a loving and powerful God would allow so much sin and suffering and evil to exist. The freedom that God gives us to make our own choices in life without direct coercion from above, it's like a two-sided coin. One side of the coin would represent the negative experiences of life, and the other side of the coin representing the positive experiences that would not be possible if those negative experiences did not exist. Negative experiences help us in two ways. And by the way, negative experiences would include sin and evil and suffering, okay? First, those negative experiences provide a backdrop which enables us to see and appreciate the positive. For example, light is accentuated by darkness. Love is most appreciated when one is most in need of it. If no one needed love, what would be the point? What would be the benefit? The greater the offense, the greater the impact of a pardon. The greater the hurt, the more soothing the relief. The greater the sorrow, the greater the joy when sorrow ends. Every single positive feeling or emotion is made possible and enhanced by the existence of its opposite. Now, the second way negative experiences help us is by the lessons learned. We cannot learn patience without trials. You ever heard the prayer, God, give me patience and I want it right now? We can't learn patience unless we experience circumstances where we need to be patient. We cannot give sacrificially without sacrifice. We cannot learn to forgive if there are no offenses. The Apostle Paul said it like this in Romans 5:20. The law was brought in so that the trespass might increase. But where sin increased, grace increased all the more. In another place he said, for God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. Selfless, self-sacrificing agape love could not exist in a world that is free from sin, suffering, and evil. So far, I've attempted to remove a couple of obstacles to belief in God. Now I'd like to turn your attention to some reasons to believe. Please keep in mind that I will not be presenting irrefutable proofs of God's existence. For me, however, the evidence is so strong as to leave no room for reasonable doubt. The best evidence of the existence of God, in my view, results from a process of deductive reasoning whereby conclusions are deduced from universally accepted scientific facts and historical truths. An example of this kind of reasoning would be calculating the probability of certain natural processes occurring without divine supernatural intervention. According to Dr. Hugh Ross, a highly respected astrophysicist and also a pastor, the mathematical probability of even one planet existing in the universe which is capable of supporting life is much less than one chance in 100,000 trillion. A probability that small is for all practical purposes. You know, you've heard it said, but many times on shows, scientific shows and things like that, that, oh, the universe must be teeming with life. There's so many planets out there capable of supporting life. Well, the actual reverse is true. If you actually calculate the odds of a planet even existing that could support life as we know it, the odds are absolutely close to zero. Dr. Ross lists 75 criteria that must be satisfied for a planet to be capable of supporting life. In other words, there are 75 different characteristics that a planet has to have in order for life to exist. Without even one of those were missing, if even one of those characteristics were missing, it would not be possible to have life on that planet. So when you multiply all of those 75 individual probabilities, you arrive at the probability of a planet existing that could support life. And you'll find these 75 criteria listed on Dr. Ross's website, reasons.org. This was some years ago that I saw this on his website, so it may not be there now, but I'm sure he's got something. I'm sure he's found even more criteria. I'm sure right now the odds, in his view, are even less. It's virtually impossible for there to be a planet in the universe that can support life, just based on those probabilities. Using mathematical formulas, probabilities can also be calculated for other natural processes occurring without divine intervention. One of those would be the creation of life on this planet, or its evolution into higher forms. If you actually calculate the probabilities of that occurring, they are so infinitesimally small that they are basically zero. So it would logically follow then that the probability of the intelligent design of our universe and a planet Earth and life on Earth is infinitely great, and for all practical purposes certain. Additional evidence for the existence of God may be found in the study of quantum mechanics and general relativity. Many scientists, especially theoretical physicists, are coming to realize that we don't actually live in a physical, material world, but a supernatural world instead. Now, they don't use the word supernatural. But they do use terms like non-physical. Their belief in a natural world subject only to the natural laws of Newtonian physics has given way to the idea that the world we observe and experience consists solely of immaterial waves of energy. And they can only be described as probabilities or possibilities, and they don't collapse into actual reality unless somebody's watching, unless a conscious observer is present. This lends support to the idea that we are, in a manner of speaking, spiritual or non-physical beings. Later in this book, this subject will be explored in greater detail. Belief in the supernatural makes it much easier for me to believe in a supernatural, immaterial creator God. The testimony of people who have experienced near-death experiences provides strong evidence that God exists. And it also gives us valuable insights into the reality of an afterlife in heaven or spiritual planes of existence. The evidence for the reality and genuineness of these experiences is, in my view, very irrefutable. It will be covered in more detail later chapter in my book and also in a later video. Various polls have revealed that the vast majority of people on earth share my belief in the existence of God. But most do not believe in the divine inspiration of the Christian scriptures. And that brings us to the second part of this video. Are the Christian scriptures divinely inspired by God, and do we find within their pages reliable information about God's nature and how we may relate to him? My belief in the truth of the Christian Bible has been reinforced throughout my life by my own experiences of God working in my life and in the lives of those around me. But the foundation of my belief includes both scientific and historical evidence. A powerful case for the truth of the Christian scriptures can be made from historical evidence. In a court of law, the guilt or innocence of a person on trial is supported by historical evidence. A powerful case for the truth of Christian scriptures can be made from historical evidence. Known historical facts are corroborated by eyewitnesses to prove the case. In the case of the scriptures, there are many historical events which are universally accepted, even by skeptics. We know that most of the original apostles and many of their closest followers suffered intense persecution and martyrdom for what they believed to be the truth of the resurrection, of which they were actual eyewitnesses. It's much easier for me to believe the truth of their claims than to believe that they deliberately lied about it for personal advantage. While I don't believe in the inerrancy of the Christian scriptures, I do believe they were divinely inspired. Much of the Bible consists of stories, legends, sayings, and actual historical events that were handed down verbally for many years, and in some cases centuries, before they were written down. Even after taking written form, they were subject to later additions and embellishments by well-meaning redactionists who exercised a form of poetic license with respect to the literal truth, in order to teach theological truths from their unique perspectives in history. This, in my view, doesn't make the scriptures less true from a theological standpoint. It does, however, create problems when we base certain aspects of our theology on a literal interpretation of passages which might not be accurate in the objective historical sense. For example, it may well be that the writers and editors of the Genesis accounts believed that the creation of the cosmos, including all mankind, occurred over a period of 6 literal 24-hour days. It is not necessary for us today to believe this in order to accept the underlying truth that God is, after all, still the creator of everything. At the same time, I would be careful not to develop a doctrine of original sin and or the moral and spiritual depravity of mankind solely on a literal interpretation of the Genesis account, or to blame everything on Satan, who took the form of a serpent in the mythical Garden of Eden. Another historical argument for the truth of the Scriptures, and the New Testament in particular, would be that there is no other good explanation for the influence of Christianity on subsequent human history. The following is an adaptation taken from a sermon by Dr. James Allen Francis in The Real Jesus and Other Sermons. It's called One Solitary Life. Here is a man who was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He grew up in another village. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years he was an itinerant preacher. He never owned a home. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never held a family. He never went to college. He never put his foot inside a big city. He never traveled 200 miles from the place he was born. He never did one of the things that usually accompany greatness. He had no credentials but himself. While still a young man, the tide of popular opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. One of them denied him. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed upon a cross between 2 thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on earth, his coat. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. 19 long centuries have come and gone. And today, he is the centerpiece of the human race, the leader of a column of progress. I am far within the mark when I say that all the armies that ever marched, all the navies that were ever built, all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned put together have not affected the life of man upon this earth as powerfully as has that one solitary life. Another type of historical evidence for the validity of the Scriptures would be the application of common sense and logic to the testimony of Jesus Christ himself and his followers. Even unbelievers regard Jesus as a great moral teacher, probably the greatest of all time. But if Jesus were only a great moral teacher and not really the Messiah, the Son of God he claimed to be, he would have been very deceitful or a lunatic, hardly the description of a man who forever changed the course of history and has been worshipped by millions of people since his death. In the words of C.S. Lewis from his book Mere Christianity, a man who was merely a man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on the level of the man who says he is a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. Another reason I believe in the truth of the Christian Scriptures is that in actual practice, Christianity works amazingly well for those who devote their lives to its teachings. Christian prayer has the power to dramatically transform and improve lives, and many who convert to Christianity are rescued from the bondage of fear, unhappiness, and self-destructive lifestyles. During my investigations over the past 10 years, I studied many extra-biblical sources of truth, including near-death experiences, world religions, paranormal experiences, quantum physics, mysticism, ancient and modern philosophy, and so on. After that, I have concluded that the Christian scriptures contain the absolute highest expression of human ideals, the noblest of which is unconditional, sacrificial love for all mankind, which is embodied in the God of the Bible and the life, teachings, and character of Jesus Christ. Thanks for listening.